My job sends me to neighboring countries for teaching regularly, so I'm used to unusual and contorted expense sheets for international travel. I'm high enough in the food chain to be allowed first-class train travel. Since I have a yearly second-class subscription to our national railway, I don't need any national ticket and so don't have any physical copy, which gets tricky when the time comes to submit the expense sheets. Custom is that we print out a screen capture of the online shop of the National Railway. Yeah, paperless is still a faraway utopia, and expense the corresponding sum in the sheet. So far, so good. Travel expenses are covered with a pretty generous lump sum due to the contract with that particular client. My job has already billed my work and gotten the money, including the travel expense lump sum. I submitted my expense sheet in time with a copy from the international ticket, which reads Mayhew's hometown to client's facility city. Return first-class ticket, including first-class upgrade and international discount, due to subscription. So I simply took the cost of the ticket, added it to the hotel and food cost, and sent it 2 months ago, not wanting to do some useless, busy work. I was told yesterday that it was denied by our finance service because the ticket doesn't start at company office city. The messenger was very apologetic and offered to insist and resubmit on my behalf. I said, please don't. I'll resubmit it myself. QMC. So, on non-billable company time, I printed return tickets and first-class upgrades from company office city to border city and attached the additional sheets to the rest of the receipts. After deducting the already accounted for first-class upgrade of Mayhew's hometown to border city, the whole expense sheet comes out 10% higher in my favor, and our internal financial controller and the central financial service get to re-review my expense sheet. I used to work in a disability shared accommodation agency. It's a job where you support 6 people with disabilities who share accommodation. It's shift work, 2 clients per staff member during the day, 1 staff member on a sleepover at night. The rosters are 4-week rotating rosters. I was employed as a 0.75, meaning I work 75% of what is considered full-time, equating to 57 hours a fortnight. Working shifts sucked, but the pay was good. I was working in a house I'll call Sunup. Sunup had 4 residents and 7 workers. Each house had a house supervisor. They reported to the cluster manager, who managed 6 houses. Cluster managers reported to the CEO. By company policy, leave requests are first in best-dressed, meaning you need to put your leave in early to ensure you get it. I was transferred to Sunup from a 6-client house due to my qualifications and situations I cannot legally disclose. I worked for the first year, got to know staff, clients, house supervisor, etc. There was an obvious clique between 4 staff members, each school holiday. 3 would apply for leave, and 1 would call in sick with a medical certificate covering the same amount of time. They would always rotate who is sick to hide what they were up to. They were friends outside of work who would go party together and such. After a year, the house supervisor fell sick. One of the clique members, Karen, was an acting appointment supervisor, and it went to hell. She tried reducing my hours and giving extra time to a friend. I pointed out that I'm contracted for 57 hours a fortnight, so I'm getting paid for 57 hours a fortnight. Her friends got extra shifts and were given the best shifts, and we're all around favored by Karen. In January, I put in leave for March school holidays. Karen rejected it on the grounds that others had already submitted leave. Her clique all applied for this time. I left this alone. In March, I checked the leave calendar for the June school holidays. Each house had a leave calendar so management and staff can check whose scheduled leave is. It was empty. I submitted leave again, and it was rejected, Karen said. Sorry, you were too slow. Karen said that A, B, and C, basically her clique, already submitted leave. The next day, the leave calendar showed this. In May, I checked Christmas leave calendar, put in my leave, and sure enough, got the same result. This annoyed me, as I have a family that I wanted to take on holiday. I spoke to the cluster manager, also a part of the clique, who said there is nothing I can do. Note, I had no leave taken in 2 years. January the following year, the clique was on holiday. We had a gastro outbreak across our facilities, so we were short-staffed. All available staff, including CEO, were covering shifts. I was rostered on with the CEO one shift. During the shift, he said to me, "You have a bit of leave accumulated. You should probably take some." I put in 3 requests last year. All were rejected as others apparently already applied for those dates. Let's lock in your leave now. Okay, how about 4 weeks over Christmas? I filled out the form and the CEO signed it off. He filled out the leave calendar and put my application in Karen's pigeonhole. I was on sleepover that night, so I took my application, photocopied it for myself, and replaced it under the mountain of paperwork in her pigeonhole, knowing she wouldn't see it for a few months. In March, I checked the leave calendar. I noticed my Christmas leave disappeared and was replaced with Karen A, B, and C. I didn't say anything as I had a leave form with the CEO's signature. Fast forward October. The original house supervisor passed away, and the acting supervisor was appointed permanent supervisor by the cluster manager with a mandatory 3-month probation. December comes around, and it's the first week of my leave. I get a call from Karen. "Where are you?" "On leave." "I didn't approve any leave. Get to work now." I come in. Karen chews me out, stating she didn't get an application form. She went on to say, "Even if you submitted it, I would reject it, as you should know by now that we always take 2 weeks in December-January. She wrote me up for insubordination. I worked that shift, but when Karen left, I emailed the CEO filling him in on what happened. He called a meeting with me and Karen. "What exactly happened?" he asked. Karen cut me off to say he took it upon himself to approve leave, so I wrote him up for skipping work. "Actually, I submitted leave in January while you were away." "No, you didn't." The CEO then tells her, "Yes, he did. I approved it and added it to the leave calendar." "Oh, but we already had 4 staff booked on leave, sir." He then asks her to show him the leave forms. She says, I destroyed them. I then hand Karen my copy of my form signed by the CEO. The CEO then says he is on leave. I'm also going to sun up and I'm investigating this situation. He then looks at me and says, "My apologies. Go home. I'm extending your leave by an extra week." I go home, and I come in 4.5 weeks later to be told that Karen has lost her promotion. She is thin ice. The CEO found out that Karen has been rejecting leave requests. She shredded my request without looking past the date. She deleted my leave from the calendar. The CEO then told Karen that this borders on fraud. The CEO also separated the clique to different houses. He changed the leave policy to state that he must sign off leave requests in addition to house supervisor and cluster managers. He also ensured that all staff had access to prime leave dates. Karen was fired 2 weeks later for failing audit requirements. Okay, so I am an intern at the moment, and this happened to my supervisor, not me. So as the solicitor in a rural southern county in the U.S., my boss has to deal with a number of interesting people. There was one case she worked on where a string of robberies occurred. Now, the defendant was convicted and ordered to pay restitution. Now, one of the victims had estimated the majority of the items stolen, a TV, lawnmower, some tools, etc., as valued at $2,500 total, with the exception of an heirloom Rolex which they were insistent they owned and was worth $10,000. Now, this victim had been on the other side of the court case as a defendant many times, mostly related to drugs, aka meth. Now, they had absolutely no proof they even owned this watch, or that the watch even existed. So my boss tried explaining to them that without proof, there's no way the judge is going to order the defendant to pay that large of an amount back to them. So they go to the sentencing, and the judge orders the defendant to pay this victim the $2,500. Now, the victim in open court addresses the judge and says, "What about my Rolex? It's a family heirloom worth $10,000 and $2,500 barely covers the other items. The defendant needs to pay me for everything and for my time too. I deserve $15,000 for all of this nonsense." The judge isn't very amused, but does his job and informs the victim that they need to speak to the prosecutor to schedule a restitution hearing within 90 days to establish the value of the items lost, and he will make sure the defendant is ordered to pay what's owed. So the victim calls in the next day demanding that my boss set up the hearing as soon as possible. Now my boss is pretty busy as they're understaffed in a large county and suggests they schedule for the end of the month so they, the victim and my boss, have time to gather proof of the current value of the items lost. But nope. They were not having it. Screamed the prosecutor was incompetent and that the only reason they're getting money is because the judge does his job and that they won the case because the defendant pleaded guilty. And if it had gone to trial, my boss would have let them walk and that they will bring the proof themselves and that my boss was useless and all sort of nonsense and bad words thrown in. So my boss relents and says the earliest that it can be done is next week, but the prosecutor's office would need the victim to come in today to sign some paperwork and advise them that they can have their own independent attorney present to make sure everything is understood. The victim comes down to the courthouse, and my boss advises them of their rights to an independent attorney, that the burden of proof of value was on them, and just generally goes over everything once more. They sign the acknowledgement form and take a copy home. My boss then has to do everything in a rush to make sure the hearing is set on the judge's docket and gets the file they have from law enforcement ready to present. So comes court day, and the victim goes before the judge and says the same thing as before, that they're due more, that $2,500, that the Rolex was an invaluable family heirloom worth at least $10,000, maybe more, and that they deserve compensation for their time and suffering and should be awarded $15,000. The judge then asks for the proof of value, and lo and behold, the victim has no real proof. They have a printed and Staples owner's manual to the TV they claimed they owned and a remote worth $800 new. Some receipts from Advanced Auto for the tools, about $150 new. A picture of them on the porch of the house where the break-in occurred with a rusted-out riding mower in the background, and a printed page from the internet of a new mower valued at $1,200, and a handwritten document describing the Rolex and the ownership status belonging to the victim, all signed by their grandfather, and a picture printed from the internet of the alleged $10,000 watch. The defense attorney got to go next and had proof that the mower was still right where it was in the picture, and argued that the documentation of the TV and watch weren't real evidence of ownership or current worth, and that the receipts from Advance Auto only a few items held any value after purchase. The judge looks at the evidence and orders restitution to be paid $300 for the broken window that was in the prosecutor's report and for a few of the tools off of the Advance Auto receipts, but denied any further payment as none of the victim's claims legit. This enraged the victim, and they freaked out in court, screaming at the judge and throwing their chair and trying to flip the desk. The judge is not happy and orders them in contempt and has the bailiff come remove them from the courthouse, and he also orders a night in jail for them. At the jail, they're searched and find a few grams of meth and a pipe with residue. This was a violation of their parole, and they ended up serving time for their suspended sentence and for the drugs, about 2 years total.